In and Jungkook were sitting in the living room when the darkness enveloped them, the sudden silence amplifying the storm raging outside. In reached for her phone's flashlight, the glow casting long shadows on the walls, making the familiar space feel eerily unfamiliar. The rain hammered against the windows and the wind howled, rattling the trees outside like they were about to snap in half. Jungkook stood up, walking to the window to peer into the darkness. "I think the storm knocked the power out," he said, his voice calm, but with a trace of unease. "It should come back soon." But In wasn't so sure. There was something unsettling about this storm, something that made the air feel thick with dread. Then it happened. From upstairs, a low, dragging sound. In froze, her breath catching in her throat. She exchanged a look with Jungkook, who had also stiffened, his brow furrowed. "You heard that too, right?" In whispered, gripping her phone tightly as if the dim light could protect them. Jungkook nodded, his face growing serious. "Stay here," he said, grabbing a flashlight and moving toward the stairs. "Wait," In called out, her voice shaky. "Don't go alone." He stopped, glancing back at her, his expression softening. "I'll be quick, I promise." But In wasn't convinced. The dragging sound came again. Louder this time, it seemed closer, whatever it was. It was moving through their home. Jungkook disappeared up the stairs, his footsteps soft against the creaky wood. In stood in the living room, the small beam of her phone light barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. Her pulse quickened as she listened, straining to hear any signs of trouble. A loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by a sharp crash. In's heart jumped into her throat, and without thinking, she sprinted up the stairs after Jungkook. As she reached the top, she found him standing in the hallway, the flashlight illuminating the floor in front of him. There was a dark, wet trail leading from their bedroom, a trail of blood. "Jungkook," In whispered, her voice trembling. "What?" He didn't answer immediately, his eyes locked on the blood. He swallowed hard, finally speaking. "I don't know, but we need to leave, now." They moved quickly toward the bedroom to gather their things. But as they approached, In's phone flickered and the flashlight went out. She cursed under her breath, trying to turn it back on. But the screen stayed black. Jungkook's flashlight flickered too, dimming as if the darkness was swallowing the light. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low and tense. The dragging sound returned, but this time it came from inside their bedroom. Jungkook pushed the door open, shining his light into the room. His breath caught in his throat. There, standing in front of the bed, was In. But it wasn't In, it was a twisted version of her. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow and dark, and blood dripped from her fingers. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth or comfort. It was malicious, as if she had been waiting for them. "Stay with me," the figure whispered, her voice distorted and wrong. In gasped, stumbling back, grabbing Jungkook's arm. "That's not me. That's not me." Jungkook stood frozen, his grip tightening around In as this figure took a slow step toward them, dragging something heavy across the floor. It was a rusted knife, its blade gleaming in the faint light. "Run!" Jungkook shouted, pulling in toward the stairs. They bolted down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in the silent house. But the dragging sound followed them, growing louder, more frantic. The creature, her doppelganger, was right behind them. They burst through the front door, stumbling into the rain-soaked night. Jungkook slammed the door shut behind them, his chest heaving as they both struggled to catch their breath. "What was that?" In gasped, looking back at the house, her body trembling with fear. Jungkook shook his head, wiping rain from his face. "I don't know, but we're not going back in there." Suddenly, the door behind them creaked open on its own. Slowly, painfully, as if something was still inside, watching them. The wind howled around them, but inside the house, everything was dead silent. In turn to Jungkook, her voice barely above a whisper, "What if it follows us?" Jungkook wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "We won't let it. I'll protect you no matter what." But as they stood there in the pouring rain, the eerie silence from the house pressed in on them. They knew this wasn't over. The creature in the house, the twisted version of it, wasn't just after them. It was waiting for them. And it wouldn't stop until they were both trapped inside that house forever. The night swallowed their final words as the house behind them seemed to breathe, waiting for their return. They moved quickly toward the bedroom to gather their things, but as they approached, In's phone flickered and the flashlight went out. She cursed under her breath, trying to turn it back on, but the screen stayed black. Jungkook's flashlight flickered too, dimming as if the darkness was swallowing the light. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low and tense. The dragging sound returned, but this time it came from inside their bedroom. Jungkook pushed the door open, shining his light into the room. His breath caught in his throat. There, standing in front of the bed, was In. But it wasn't In. It was a twisted version of her. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow and dark, and blood dripped from her fingers. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth or comfort. It was malicious, as if she had been waiting for them.